Okay. And live. Amazing. Cool. Happy Friday. And say hi if you're joining live. If you're watching the replay, let me know. I am Judy V, founder of the Codex system, a structural model for human function and behavior. And today I want to speak about something very, very, very specific. And I saw it play out this week a couple of times in my own life and also with some of my team members as well. There's a kind of signal people regularly misread, and it arrives as pressure, feels like pressure. And it can feel intense. It can feel exposing. And it can feel like friction. And it increases and decreases, depending. And it can feel like something is closing in. And it's something that we all will feel. This signal that feels like pressure is something that every single one of us will feel. We have that signal. And it will feel like pressure. As I said, feel like something is closing in. And because it feels like that, we have learned, or people have learned, or humanity has learned, society has learned to assume something is wrong. People assume that it is resistance, that it is negation. Well, I must be doing something wrong. Or people assume that it means we must stop, or something is off, or I need to fix something, or I need to push harder. And that is the point where the distortion starts. The misread of the signal that gets experienced as pressure. A lot of the time, what people are reacting to is not reality itself. They are reacting to a misread of signal. And that really, 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 really matters. Because the moment the signal is misread, that body moves from that misread signal, not from what I call blueprint, but it moves from distortion. And it goes into effort, force, pushing, overwork, tightening, bracing, a big one, urgency, self-correction, trying to regain control. And then the person thinks that the behavior that follows is necessary. But often the behavior was not a wise response to reality. It was a reaction to a misread. And this is what I want to speak about for a few minutes. Not in theory, because this is not theory. None of my work is philosophical, metaphorical, or theory. I want to speak about it in a very real way, because this sits underneath far more than people realize. Because people often think the problem is the pressure, the intensity, the friction, the feeling in the body. But often deeper issue is not the pressure. It is that the signal was immediately interpreted as threat, as negation, as resistance. And the system reacts. The body reacts. And once it reacts, the reaction then becomes behavior. And this is when you start pushing and forcing and efforting, trying to make something happen, trying to reduce discomfort, trying to get back into control, because they are now moving from reaction. They distort the next movement. And obviously there are consequences to that. So now they think, see, I was right, something was wrong. But what if that was never the clean read? What if the pressure was not the problem? The signal was misread before it was met cleanly. What if the pressure was never the signal itself? What if the pressure was what got produced when the signal was misread? Or maybe I'll say it another way. What if the meaning on the pressure we felt got produced when the signal was misread? Because the pressure may well be there, but we misread it. When we misread it, we turn it into problem. Something to be fixed, something to be efforted through, something to be reacted to, instead of it being something that is actually opening something up, that is actually support. This changes everything, because then the problem is not something too big is happening. The problem is interference took position inside the signal before the body met it cleanly. And once that happens, you react to the distortion, not to reality. And as I've said already, then the body moves into the efforting, into forcing, into urgency, into self-correction, over management and contraction. And the original signal didn't require that. Not at all, in any way, shape, or form. But the signal was occupied and turned into pressure, the type of pressure that we perceive, that we label, that we apply a meaning to, that is a problem, or bad, or difficult, or challenging. Pressure is often not the signal, it's what the interference makes of the signal. So when we experience that signal, interpreted as pressure as a problem, what if that signal is not saying contract in that moment? Because when we contract in that moment, downstream, the behavior, how we respond and react, the consequences of that contraction downstream creates a plethora of knock-on effects and impacts that creates a different reality than the reality that was there for us in that moment, the moment before it got misread. So what if it's not saying contract? What if it was revealing? What if it was revealing something is reorganizing here? What if the signal was not saying contract, but the interference turned it into pressure before contact with the signal? And your system is misreading the intensity of that as a reason to force, as a reason to effort, as a reason to manage life, manage self. It's a very different thing with very, very, very different outcomes and consequences and experiences of life and experiences of how reality gets reorganized in our life. Because the problem then is no longer, how do I remove the pressure? Wrong question. The problem becomes, why is this signal being misread so quickly that it turns into effort and reactive behavior? And this is where people get trapped, because they do not realize that behavior they are calling action is often already downstream of a distortion. And they think they're responding to reality, but often they're responding to what took position inside the signal before reality was actually met. I've written a whole white paper on this, which I published this week. I've researched this for decades, studied it, observed it, seen it in my own life, and seen it in everyday life. I can see it clearly in my own life when I create something that is category breaking, something that does not fit reality or does not fit neatly into an existing lane. There's a type of pressure that comes with that. I can feel, or it can feel exposing. It can feel charged. It can actually feel like friction. It can feel like something is bearing down. I have felt it many times in my life. I'm mostly reading the signal as it was designed. That has allowed me to create pretty extraordinary things in my life, despite 2 decades of being locked up, no education, and isolated from society. But I have a few times had to catch myself on that point of distortion. If that signal is misread, the body will move into effort, force, pushing, trying to make it happen, trying to outrun the pressure, trying to close the gap through will. And in that state, behavior becomes reactive. Look at your life. Where have you felt the pressure and made it the problem? Contracted and moved into efforting, stressing, pushing. It's not because a person is weak or they lack capacity they do that. It's just because the signal was misread as negation. And that, let's face it, that's how society works. That's how we're taught. We're actually conditioned, programmed, taught. It's how we live. Unfortunately, constant brace, constant preparing to brace, constant on alert. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that when you look at the state of health globally. Instead of being held long enough for a different movement to become available. Because interference converted it, or converted the signal before what I call blueprint movement issued. The signal was distorted before clean movement came through. And that distinction is enormous because we are so trained to pacify, soothe, distract. We won't sit with that for a moment. And because if the signal is misread, then the body starts generating behavior from contraction. And we wonder why life is hard, why we feel stuck, why we have what people call money blocks, which is a weird concept because it doesn't exist. Or relationship issues, or vitality, or energy issues, or health issues. That comes from contraction. And once that happens, the behavior itself can distort and does distort reality even further. And the person pushes where space was needed, forces where signal needed to widen, efforts where more information was still arriving, collapses openness because pressure was interpreted too quickly. And then they think the pressure caused the problem. But often the behavioral consequence came from the misread. And that is the point. The pressure may not have been the problem, the misread was. I personally experienced it this week with someone that I've just started working with, somebody who's new on the team. I said to her on the call, we had a meeting, and I said to her that this is what I would love you to do. And in that moment, she felt pressure. And as I continued to talk, I saw it. In that moment, I saw it. Her picking that pressure and labeling it, applying a meaning to it that meant a problem. And in that moment, I could see the next 6 months of our relationship unfolding, one of tension, of disappointment, of anxiety for both of us. So I stopped and I said to her, that pressure you're feeling right now, that pressure is a signal of expansion, of creativity. Sit with it. Don't apply a meaning that because what she did, the pressure, the problem was she felt stressed to perform. And the moment I said it, she saw it. She's a client and she's worked with me for a while. She is within the Codex system. So she, as I pointed it out, she saw it immediately, and her whole face, her whole body, her whole energy, everything about her in that moment as she saw it changed. The instruction didn't change. What is required didn't change. But she no longer distorted the signal as a problem. And we do it all the time. I see people do it all the time. And it matters in all areas of life, not just in work. In relationships, in visibility, in money. Oh, huge in money, in timing, in health and vitality, in joy and happiness, in living the fullest expression of our blueprint that we are here to live. It matters whenever the body encounters intensity and assumes it means something is wrong. Because the moment intensity is collapsed into threat, behavior changes. And then the person lives the consequence of that changed behavior and calls it reality when it is a form of reality that they constructed. Because the signal was misread. So many, many times we're not living reality cleanly, but we're living a reality through distortion, living what happened after the signal was misread. And this is why so many people, you can be hugely intelligent, massive emotional intelligence, phenomenally aware, highly perceptive, extraordinarily talented, and still keep repeating patterns that do not make sense to you. Because the issue is not simply that you cannot or you do not understand yourself enough. The issue is that something happens before the behavior. And yet, in the whole world of change and self-development, what do we focus on? We focus on the patterns, we focus on the behavior. That's not where the start is. That's not the source. And once we do that, once that happens, the rest unfolds very, 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 very quickly. And this is why people can feel like, I knew better. I saw it happening. If 6 months from now, this new team member of mine and I missed that signal and she missed the signal, and in 6 months' time, she took that pressure and was performing in that pressure, and the relationship got potentially untenable, and we parted ways. She'll be questioning herself. I knew better. I know this. How did it get here? How did this happen? How is this the reality? I'm sure you can relate to this in situations you've had in your life. If you look back, something has collapsed and you're thinking, but how? People can tell something was going on, but still moved in a way that distorted everything. Because by then, the behavioral layer was already downstream, and we're responding and reacting and trying to reorganize on the behavior. But that behavior, that layer is downstream. Nothing changes. Sure, you get a temporary kick, dopamine kick. Well, maybe this is it. This is the breakthrough I needed. And it lasts for a few minutes, a few hours, a few days, a few weeks, a few months, maybe. Then next thing you look, you're back. So this connects directly to what I am opening in the Codex Deep Dive next week on the 21st of April. Not just why people repeat patterns, but why so much behavior is generated from a misread signal. Often that signal is clean blueprint signal, but it gets misread before they ever even call it me or choice or reaction or personality. So if you can see the pattern while it's happening and still not stop it, then the mechanism is not where you were taught to look. And this is what I'm opening in the deep dive. Why you do what you do. Why the pattern persisted. And why insight didn't end it. And also what actually generates behavior. And why no matter how many courses, programs you try, does not create sustainable change, does not move you from bracing, self-management, efforting, to blueprint moves, which will always feel natural and without effort. If this landed, come to the deep dive on the 21st of April, Tuesday next week. If you would love the link, comment link in the comments below, and I'll pop it over to you. But also, if you know anyone who would truly benefit from hearing this, share this with them. Because the old model doesn't just fail to change the pattern. It's worse than that. It's more dramatic than that. It teaches people to mistrust signal and then blame themselves for what follows. Have a great weekend, and I will see you on the deep dive. Bye-bye.